I got her to agree to consider you. You're halfway in, man.
Okay. So should I ask her out?
No, you don't want to freak her out. You gotta have a casual conversation first. Hello.
I mean, how do you even begin to know how to talk to a woman?
Man, I'm not really good at talking to girls.
Just talk to her like you're talking to me now.
I want to try something where I'm gonna act like a girl and you're gonna talk to me, okay?
What if she doesn't like me?
Why? You're hot.
What?
I mean, I think she will, you know. You never know with women.
You know, you're an appealing guy, man. Guy, man.
I've been skeptical of the live-action Mulan from the moment they announced it. I haven't been a fan of the other live-action Disney adaptations thus far. Overall, I found them to be too reliant on unnecessary narration and often felt like they added nothing truly interesting to the story. When the casting call came out, it became clear that they weren't going to adapt the story one-to-one from the animated. For one, Mulan apparently has secret superpowers now, which is the reason she's so good at fighting. We'll get to that in a bit. For two, Li Shang is gone, replaced by Chen Honghui, who has a rivalry with Mulan until he finds out she's a woman, at which point he starts to feel something else for her. Something like love. Sometime after that, we learned that it wasn't going to be a musical either. We won't be hearing renditions of the iconic Reflection or Be a Man or Girl Worth Fighting For, and I became a little more wary. But skeptical as I was, that didn't stop me from being excited. Mulan was a big part of my childhood, and I don't mind changes to the story as long as they're for the better, and in this case, there is a possibility they were changing the story to be more realistic and accurate to the original legend of Mulan. And maybe if they had a Chinese director or Chinese screenwriters... Look, I'm not going to act like being Chinese automatically makes you an expert on Chinese lore. I'm pointing to myself as a prime example of this. Most of the time, if you do enough research on a subject matter, you can write a good, respectful story out of it. I just thought it'd be nice if, you know, Disney weren't such a coward. The least they could have done was hired someone who has some experience in directing wuxia movies. For those who don't know, wuxia refers to a genre of fiction depicting the adventures of martial artist heroes, usually in ancient China. And I say this because I think live-action Mulan was trying to emulate the wuxia style, but I didn't even realize it until I scrolled around on Twitter and saw someone point it out. Maybe that's just indicative of me being slow, but let me explain myself. One of the hallmarks of wuxia movies is qinggong, which is a martial art technique similar to parkour. In wuxia movies, it's sometimes exaggerated to the point of defying gravity. Characters can run on walls, hop around on trees, or do incredible backflips. Many times this is achieved through wire work, and even when it's obvious the actors are on wires, audiences typically don't call this out as bad or unrealistic because it meshes with the rest of the film. When you watch something like Forbidden Kingdom or Into the Badlands, some of the few American attempts at the wuxia genre, one of which even features the actress who plays live-action Mulan, you don't mind the incredulous wire work because you understand that's just how the action is supposed to work. In live-action Mulan, multiple characters can run on walls, and there are several scenes where a character gets knocked back and they're clearly being pulled by wires. These are all reminiscent of the wuxia style, but as I was watching, I didn't recognize these as wuxia action because the rest of the movie is just so un-wuxia-like. Let me put it this way. If you took stunts like these from Fast and Furious 7 and dropped it into the first Fast movie, back when the Fast universe was still trying to be serious and grounded, it wouldn't work because that action is meant for a different type of movie. It would immediately be called out for being unrealistic and over the top. That's how I felt about the action in Mulan. If you can't recognize the movie as wuxia, then the incredulous wuxia action stands out as feeling, well, extremely incredulous. I did a bit of research. When asked about the changes being made to the story, namely removing Mushu and the musical numbers, producer Jason Reed said they became aware that audiences in China didn't like those aspects. So with the live action, they were going to strike a balance between what they thought Chinese audiences and Western audiences would like. Instead of straight up remaking the animated version, they took parts of it and mixed it with elements from other adaptations and the original Ballad of Mulan. I mean, a noble cause, trying to make the live action more faithful to the original story. That's the kind of change I can get behind. So I read the Ballad of Mulan, and now let's make some comparisons. The Ballad of Mulan is a Chinese folktale first transcribed sometime in the 6th century. Like any folktale, there are variations to the story, and likewise there are several different English translations, but for clarity's sake, I'll be referring to this translation, which I will link below if you want to read it as well. First up, we have things they kept from the ballad that the animation also did. 1. Mulan's old father being drafted to the army. 2. Mulan taking her father's place and leaving without telling her family. 3. After their fighting, the emperor offers Mulan a high-ranking position at the palace, which she turns down in favor of going back to her family. Next up, we have things they kept that the animation didn't. 1. Mulan having a sister, although in the ballad she also had a younger brother who was too young to serve in the army. 2. The Roruns being the enemies as opposed to the Huns. While this isn't specifically said in the ballad, this is commonly believed given the speculated setting of the ballad. And 3. The 2 hares. The 2 hares struck me as the most interesting in this category. In the movie, there is a scene in the beginning, and Mulan comments that they were running so fast that she couldn't really tell their genders.
Black Queen and I rode alongside, 2 rabbits running side by side. I think one was a male, one was a female. But you can't really tell when they're running that fast.
In the ballad, the hares are mentioned in the end. Mulan finally reveals her identity to her comrades, and when they are surprised that they never realize she's a woman, she offers this metaphor. While there are physical differences between a male and female hare, you can't tell the difference when they are running side by side. The live action was clearly calling back to this bit in the ballad, but in my opinion, it fails to actually utilize the hares as a metaphor. For one, the scene was presented like a Mulan doesn't want to sit in front of the loom like a well-behaved daughter. She wants to frolic in the wind and chase animals instead. This is something that the opening scene drilled into our heads.
Mulan, take control of yourself!
For 2, it wouldn't even actually work as a metaphor because in the movie, Mulan isn't the same as the men because she's just as determined and capable as them. She's the same, nay, better than the men because she has secret superpowers. Again, we will get to that, but we have 2 more of these categories to go through. Next up, things they kept from the animated that weren't in the poem. 1. Mulan being a rambunctious young woman who likes animals. 2. The matchmaking session and how badly it goes. 3. Mulan serving in the army for what feels like only a few months. In the ballad, she served for 12 years and fought many battles. This one is understandable. It's a little hard to tell a story that takes place over 10 years unless you're David Fincher. In the end, these movies are made with younger audiences in mind, and every kid movie I've seen has its main plot contained within a year at most. 4. Mulan causing an avalanche to defeat the enemies. 5. Mulan revealing her identity in the middle of the story. In the ballad, she reveals her identity at the very end after she's already returned home from the war. 6. The climactic battle taking place in the capital city, where Mulan has to rescue the emperor. Surprisingly, the ballad doesn't go into details of what exactly Mulan did during her time in the army. At most, it is mentioned that she fights 100 battles and many generals die. This one's an interesting category to me because I felt like it was a mistake to adapt only pieces of the animated version. It makes the live action teeter on the edge between remake and reimagining, and that's not exactly a good place to be because then it just keeps reminding us that an animated version exists, while at the same time feeling like it was trying to be a completely different movie, especially with the more serious tone and all the added major plot elements. Throughout the movie, they also keep referencing the music.
I don't care what she looks like.
I agree.
I care what she cooks like.
We're going to make men out of every single one of you.
And all it does is make me wish this were a musical too.
Disgrace for you, disgrace for your family.
Dishonor on you, dishonor on your cow.
They also kept the characters of Ling, Yao, and Shampo, even adding a personified version of Mulan's cricket.
I'm cricket.
Which, again, only makes me wish I was watching the animated version instead. But that's just my personal attachment to the animated Mulan. I mean, I was one of those people who were annoyed that Disney wasn't going to adapt the animated version 1-to-1. But that kind of makes me a hypocrite because one of my criticisms for live-action Disney remakes is that they're just boringly adapting things 1-to-1. So what gives? What do I really think? I'll tell you, after this last category. You might have realized that in these comparisons, I haven't talked about the Phoenix, the Witch, Mulan's new love interest, and Mulan's superpowers. And that's because they don't exist in the ballad. That's the worst part. These are arguably the most outlandish changes they made, and Disney didn't even have a good reason for adding them. They're not historically accurate, they're not true to the source material, and they severely mess up the themes and character motivations. Here are my real thoughts. They could have gone two ways with this live-action adaptation. They could go full reimagining, accurate to the source material, no overt references to the animated version. The ballad doesn't cover much of what Mulan does in the war, so they could write some new and interesting action pieces. There's no magic or witches or superpowers, the climax isn't her rescuing the emperor, and she doesn't reveal her identity until the very end. Or, they stick to the animated movie, but with the appropriate changes. I've said before, Chinese audiences didn't like how westernized the animated movie was. Fine, Disney can remove the songs and Mushu and the ancestors, and they can take that extra time to develop Mulan's experience in the army. This might be enough to make this movie feel different from the animated. Without the music and Mushu, the movie is already in a less comedic, more somber tone. It is a war movie after all. Since the animated Mulan sped through the training in music and montage, we can stretch out these scenes instead. There's a moment in the live action where just before a battle, Mulan gives a pep talk to her comrades, but then we see her hands shaking. She's clearly terrified, but she's still trying to lift their spirits. This scene almost works. Play on that. In the beginning, let us see how determined Mulan is to prove herself in more scenes than just her climbing the pole or mountain. Show us how upset she is after each failure. Show her bonding with her comrades over how much they all suck. Show her gradually getting better and better. Show her and her comrades all pumping each other up as they carry the buckets of water up the mountain, and show us their collective triumph as they all finally reach the peak. They can do this. They're strong now. They can get through the war together. Show them coming across the dead battlefield. Show them horrified at the death and destruction. Show them coming to the realization that they might not be ready for war after all, even after all the training they've gone through, all the confidence they gathered. So when we see Mulan trying to cheer up her friends, when we see her hands shake, we really feel this moment. We really feel their fear. They might not make it through a battle, they might not survive, but they're in this together. Alright, let's talk about Mulan's superpowers. The animated version of Mulan came under criticism for westernizing the story, but at least they understood one thing. Mulan wasn't special. She wasn't particularly strong or good at fighting. She joined the army out of love for her father and out of sheer determination. She was the same as the men of the army in that she sucked. None of them knew how to fight, and they all had to train to be good soldiers. The live action made Mulan a super-powered Jedi because she was super connected to her chi. And I have never rolled my eyes so much at the mention of chi, especially in this movie, which acts like chi is the freaking force. Disney loves their Star Wars, and they needed a reason for Mulan to have superpowers. She's naturally good at fighting, she can dodge arrows, she's super strong, she can run on walls, and she can kick spears into people's chests. A lot. In the animated Mulan, she made it to the top of that pole, again out of sheer determination. She wanted to prove she had a place in the army. She wanted to prove she could do something right. In the live action, she made it to the top of the mountain because she's just so good at it. You see? She doesn't need training or practice. Oh no, she just has to unleash her chi. In a confrontation with the witch, who we haven't even talked about yet, the witch tells Mulan that she will never be accepted for who she is, and hiding her true identity is poisoning her chi.
Your deceit weakens you. It poisons your chi.
So Mulan stops holding back. She stops pretending to be a man, and the narration, yes, there's narration, tells us Hua Jun died, but Mulan lived. This is the moment we're supposed to be cheering, but I just couldn't get over how hackneyed the narration is. Anyway, and then Mulan stops pretending to be a man. She takes off her armor and lets down her hair, because apparently that's what's separating her from being a woman. And can I just say, please, for the love of God, keep your hair tied up. Loose hair is so bad in battle. We get the point, Disney. She's not pretending to be a man anymore. Just please tie her hair back up. I can't stand it. Disney has a problem with how they empower the female characters in their live-action remakes, and this is a prime example of it. In Aladdin, they try to give Jasmine more agency by giving her a song about not wanting to be speechless, but then they undercut it by having her literally be speechless and powerless in the climax. And then they try to fix that by making her the Sultan. Yay? In Beauty and the Beast, they give Belle a subplot where she's inventing things and teaching girls how to read, which the townspeople scorn her for, but then this subplot is never resolved because the townspeople never come to the realization that Belle isn't wrong for doing these things. This is such surface-level empowerment that is actually kind of funny. And Mulan is already an empowered character. Giving her superpowers doesn't automatically make her more empowered. If anything, the live action somehow does her a disservice. Let's see, the movie is about Mulan but is narrated by her dad.
There have been many tales of the great warrior Mulan.
This line that Mulan says in the animated,
You said you trust Ping. Why is Mulan any different?
Is given to Hong Hui, her love interest.
You would believe Hua Jun. Why do you not believe Hua Mulan?
She has superpowers, which undermines the idea that she was the same as the men by simply existing and being just as determined as them. She's only better because she has superpowers. Their idea of Mulan embracing her womanhood is taking down her hair, as if the patriarchy existed in her hair tie. Everyone in the army has long hair. And they make it a big point that, oh look, Mulan is a woman leading an army of men.
Impossible. A woman leading a man's army.
When I feel like that's never been what Mulan was about. Look, when I read the ballad, I was surprised by how much it focuses on the familial aspect and how much the actual war is breezed over. Because really, the war isn't the point. Mulan didn't set out to prove that women were just as capable as men, that's just something that happened to occur. The story is about how brave and selfless she is, that she's willing to put herself at the risk of death to protect her family. In the animated, they have her question if she joined to save her father or if she simply wanted to prove she could do something right, but we never lose sight of the theme of devotion to family. The live action, on the other hand, doesn't waste its time on a simple, functioning plot. It wants Mulan to have untamed raw powers like Hercules. It wants Mulan to hide not only her identity, but her superpowers.
You must hide the chief.
It wants Mulan to face off with a witch and realize she shouldn't need to hide her identity. It wants Mulan to single-handedly save everyone while being completely unscathed herself. It wants Mulan to lead her military unit, a woman leading an army of men, as if that has been her goal this entire time. This is so far removed from her original intention to join the army that when they bring back the theme of devotion to family at the end, it feels absolutely unearned. The point is, Mulan's story should have been simple and tight. She takes her father's place in the war and has to hide her identity or face the penalty of death. Simple, but effective and compelling. The live action made it a superficial and convoluted girl power story about a super special chosen one. Oh wow, I just spent a ton of time talking about all that. Let's just go over some smaller grievances. There's magic now. I know magic is a thing that exists in Chinese lore, but I'm not sure Mulan is the right place to put it. You could make the argument that the animated Mulan has magic too, if you want to count whatever was going on with Mushu, but that at least felt like extremely soft magic. Mushu couldn't really do much other than give Mulan some pep talks and light things on fire. The live action has a witch who can transform into birds and possess people. I had to Google the witch's name, and I just found out she's a personified version of Shan Yu's falcon. I can't believe I didn't make the connection. Anyway, her name is Shen Yang. I've seen people say they think her character is interesting, but honestly I don't feel the same way. Did I see potential in her backstory? Of course. Basically, when she was a young woman like Mulan, she was cast out from her society for being a witch, and even though she hates working for the Roarens, they're the only people who at least found her useful. That's exactly the type of villain I like, but we weren't given nearly enough time to start empathizing with her before she redeems herself and immediately dies. The movie didn't cultivate any intrigue or curiosity regarding her backstory, so when we finally learn it, it feels like the answer to a question that we didn't ask. So here's my question. Why did you just let Mulan go without a fight after you spilled Borikhan's entire evil scheme to her? You're not even gonna try to stop her? Okay. This next point is only magic adjacent, but this movie includes two people who can catch arrows in mid-air. One of them is the main villain Borikhan, and the other is, get this, the freaking Emperor. I'm pretty sure the movie's way of explaining this is that they're also very in touch with their chi, something that only men can do because if you're a woman then you're just called a witch. At the end, Borikhan tries to shoot the Emperor with an arrow and the Emperor catches the arrow, throws it to Mulan, and she drop kicks it back into Borikhan's chest. Yes, it is as ridiculous as it sounds, and I think I burst out laughing. There are some movies where I can suspend my disbelief for incredibly out-of-the-world action, like the aforementioned Fast and Furious and Great Wall, which I make the connection to because of all the wall running. But at least Great Wall is fantasy. It's not trying so hard to be historically accurate. Mulan's story should have been more grounded in reality, and I just can't see the story as straight-up fantasy. I can't buy that there's a shape-shifting witch or that people can run on walls or dodge arrows Matrix style, and I will fully accept that as my own problem. But again, I just want to point out that the live action made changes to be more historically accurate, only to do whatever the heck this is. I said before that this movie should have spent more time developing Mulan's time in training. At the same time, it should also better develop her relationship with her comrades, especially with her not Li Shang love interest Hong Hui. As a side note, I don't see why they had to change the love interest's name. They said they removed Li Shang because they didn't feel comfortable with the power gap between a commanding officer and a subordinate, but that didn't mean they had to change his name, right? Like, sure, demote him to a regular soldier, but his name can still be Li Shang, right? Like, he's still the dude who fell in love with Mulan before realizing she's a woman. The Baikon is still there. I don't know, it's just weird that they kept Ling and Yao and Chen Po and the freaking cricket, but Li Shang is the one that has to go. Anyway, Mulan, as her alternate identity Hua Jun, is supposed to have a rivalry with Hong Hui that gives away to grudging respect. We're supposed to believe that their rivalry started when Mulan falls and Hong Hui calls her a little man but offers her a hand.
Need a hand, little man?
Mulan takes this as an insult and draws her sword on him. I mean, that's dramatic, but I don't think it's dramatic in the right way. Mulan is the more aggressive one in this situation when I feel like it should have been Hong Hui. And I don't mean aggressive as in he should have physically beat her up or something. I mean he should have done something more insulting than calling her little man. Maybe he laughs meanly and mocks her for being girly and weak and sarcastically says, "Do you need a hand?" I feel like that would have had the right amount of drama to get Mulan to immediately despise him. I mean, I would think this would be the type of conflict Disney would have wanted, since it sets it up that Mulan would have to eventually prove him wrong. That's the comeuppance that we the audience can get behind. But as it is, the movie starts the conflict a little too tame in my opinion. I would have liked to see them legitimately hate each other. You know, butting heads in the barracks, purposefully bumping into each other, calling each other names, trying to one-up each other in training. Because the truth is, they're both greenies and neither of them know how to fight. Hong Hui makes fun of Mulan for being weak, but once they actually start training, it's clear that they're both on the same skill level, which is to say they both suck. So suddenly, Hong Hui has to prove that he's actually better than Mulan, and Mulan wants to prove that she isn't worse than Hong Hui. And look, there's a good conflict. And when we finally get to that duel, we feel that charged competition between them. When Mulan beats his ass, Hong Hui gets a moment of humility. He was wrong for underestimating her. By the way, I think they both should have been reprimanded for this. It wasn't supposed to be a duel, they were supposed to be practicing moves. What would have been cool is if they're being scolded by Commander Donnie Yen for misbehaving and Hong Hui, as the beginning of his redemption arc, admits that he was the one who started the fight, not Mulan. He gets sentenced to, I don't know, garbage duty or something, while Mulan is let off the hook. After they leave the commander's tent, Mulan is skeptical of Hong Hui and is like, I don't need your help. And Hong Hui is like, I wasn't helping you, look, I shouldn't have called you those things. And Mulan is like, are you apologizing? And Hong Hui is reluctant to admit it, but he's like, yeah, I guess so. And that's the beginning of their grudging respect. I'm just spitballing here, really. In the live action, I didn't feel like their relationship really developed at all between their first meeting and this bathing scene, where Hong Hui says that even though he knows Mulan doesn't like him, he hopes that they can have each other's backs in battle. Like, imagine if they had built up their relationship and they start being more friendly to each other. But when Mulan turns her back on Hong Hui in the lake, it really hurts him. Because Hong Hui doesn't know that she's hiding her identity. He assumes that she still distrusts him, even after he thought they had become friends. So when he says this bit about hoping they can have each other's backs in battle, that hurts for us too, because we want him to understand that no, Mulan doesn't hate him, she just can't explain why she's hiding. At the end of the movie, before Mulan leaves to go home, Hong Hui offers a handshake to her and says,
Still won't take my hand.
I had honestly forgotten about the scene it's calling back to, and I was like, when did he try to take Mulan's hand? Usually a callback bit like this will include at least one reminder between the setup and payoff, especially in this case since he says still won't take my hand as if he had tried to take Mulan's hand more than once in the preceding story. This bit was missing that reminder. Alternatively, they could have made the first take my hand scene more memorable. For example, in the animated Mulan, the pole climbing bit has no reminder, but it doesn't matter because the setup was so visually distinct and integral to the training montage that we can immediately make the connection. So, Mulan's relationship with the rest of her unit. There's a scene later in the movie after she has already revealed her identity and been expelled from her unit when she tries to tell Commander Donnie Yen that the Rorans are going to kill the Emperor, but Donnie Yen doesn't believe her. But then the soldiers all start saying,
I believe MULAN.
I believe MULAN.
I believe MULAN.
I believe MULAN. I believe MULAN. I believe MULAN.
And this convinces Donnie Yen to listen. In fact, he does more than listen. He lets her lead the unit to the capital city. Yay? But the point is, this I believe MULAN scene felt so weak because we never saw her build good rapport with her friend, let alone the entire unit. The extent we see is maybe 2 scenes where they sit down and chat, and that scene after Mulan kicks Honghui's butt and they're all like, whoa, you're so cool. That's honestly not enough for us, or for me at least, to believe there's any camaraderie between them. We hardly know these characters. In the animated, they don't have too much screen time either, but they're given such vibrant personalities that we're naturally drawn to them. In the live action, all I know is one of them is called Cricket, and one of them rolls around in his sleep a lot, and one of them says ow a lot, but without rewatching the movie, I couldn't tell you which was which. I saw someone else say this, but the usage of the phoenix in this movie is quite suspect. The Chinese phoenix doesn't symbolize rebirth or strength the way a Western phoenix does. On its own, it symbolizes harmony as a new emperor ascends to the throne, and with the dragon, it symbolizes union between a man and a woman. Mulan neither becomes the emperor nor gets married in this movie. This movie takes place in ancient China. I don't think this is the place to be using the phoenix as a shorthand for strength and rebirth. Not to mention, it was also just weirdly heavy-handed. There's a lot more nitpicks I can make, but honestly, I'm starting to feel a little bad for ragging on this movie so hard. I watched this movie with my family, and at one point my parents said, "This movie doesn't move you at all." And they were right. There was no epic swelling soundtrack when Mulan decided to take her father's place. There was no dramatic moment when she donned the armor and burst out of the stable into the storming night. There was no anguish as Mulan's parents tried to chase after her, calling her name. All the movie had to offer is this. Chinese audiences didn't like the animated version, so Disney made this new one with the intent to appeal to them. Did you know this Disney castle in the beginning is the one from Shanghai Disney World? That's cool, except that it means nothing. It's a superficial effort to be like, see, we care about the Chinese origins of this story. Well, I find that doubtful, and I'd be hard-pressed to believe Chinese audiences will prefer this sloppy version. Towards the end of writing this script, I found out that Disney approached both Ang Lee and Jiang Wen to direct this movie, but clearly neither happened. But honestly, even with an Asian director at the helm, I'm not sure that would have saved this movie. Wow, yeah, I feel really bad now. Let me say some positive things about this movie. Let's see. Everyone looked pretty good in this movie. I still really love this photo shoot they did way back when. This movie has a nice color palette. The cinematography is generally very pretty. And, oh, Ming-Na Wen is in it! Yay!